Okay, so I was perusing Facebook and there was a pretty great little post going there. Every once in a while there's a gym, and I was talking about how do you tune up pritchels and how do you heat treat them because mine keep breaking and blah blah blah. And man, it blew up and went on like crazy. And there was a lot of good information there really, but in reality, I mean, we're farriers, we could overcomplicate a fart. And this thing could be as simple as you want it to be or as complicated as you want it to be. I kind of like to keep it simple. I'm a little dumb, so if you overcomplicate it and get all that data involved, you leave me real fast. All I'm trying to do is knock a slug out of the bottom of a hole. Okay, so depending on our section and our nail hole, right? So we should have already head stamped a proper shape in there. Okay, depending on how deep your section is and the size of your nail, you're probably going to need to drift a bit, right? And then this bit down here, this is what we're trying to knock out. Okay, so if your pritchel is one long taper, right, you're going to hit that sucker and you're going to knock it down in there. You're going to knock these two corners off. You're going to have this nice little hourglass, this nice little long taper going most of the way down through here, right? And your nail hole's going to suck, so you're going to back pritchel it. So then you're going to come in here and you're going to jam that same taper in this way to clean that up, and then you have a nice hourglass inside your nail hole. Now if you do that, when the blade of your nail comes through here, it's going to make contact on either side of that hourglass, but it's not going to have any contact here. So then your nail's going to be able to work, and you're going to be shearing nails all the time. Right? And you're just going to have crappy nail holes. Your nail hole's not going to fit, and you're going to pritchel, and you're going to shape, and you're going to pritchel and shape. So if you come in here, and we want to knock that slug out, have good blade contact through as much of that hole as we can get, the bottom of that pritchel is going to have to come parallel for enough of the blade that parallel section can reach from the bottom of your head stamp all the way through the rest of that section. Okay, that makes sense there? And then it's going to knock out a nice clean hole. So you can have good fit. Now what I actually like to do is neck this down just a little bit, and I'll put like a little, I'll pack this back in when I'm forging them up, and put a tiny little bell on the end of that, okay, to where it's actually pushing that slug out and I'm really loose right through here, and it makes a nice little blade, right? So if you've head stamped that and you've drifted it, all this material here is kind of isolated and compressed, so it's ready to come out a clean plug. So all you need is a nice pritchel to knock the slug out of the bottom. And if you pritchel at the right heat, all that heat treating business doesn't matter too much. Most people are either pritcheling way too hot or pritcheling way too cold. So we're going to get in here. I'm going to show you how to grind these pritchels up. In my opinion, it's how to get a nice looking nail hole, not have to back pritchel it too much so you don't hourglass the nail hole, right? So if you have to back pritchel a little bit just to make it look tidy, it should just be the very tiny little edge on the bottom of the shoe. Not much at all. So, alright, we'll kick over to the other camera and do a little grinding. I've got a batch here we're going to grind up, and the first thing we're going to do is tune up the struck end. And I know that everywhere I go, and including my tools, to be honest, the struck end doesn't get enough love. So we're going to kick over into hyperspeed and, you know, grind up the struck end on all these suckers. Start with my back pritchel. Okay, now I want one long taper, and so I can take my ruler and lay it alongside these tall walkers along that long taper, and I can see where things kind of dive off and go crazy. And so I'm going to look a little bit like a fat troll humped over here, but body position is important. Ooh, the belt grind is important too. I'm not going to keep going with that big old 36 braid in there. So I want to use a pretty fresh 80 grit belt. And as you know, I'm pretty cheap. So this one's done all its fair share of woodworking. And now that it's done being a beaver, we're going to do the dressing. But the reason I want a fresh belt is because as you grind on it, you dig grooves and things in it. And I want this thing to be pretty fresh, flat, and straight. And I started out finding 80 grit removes an appropriate amount of stock without leaving too many digs in it. So I'm going to start on that hump and work away from it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start at the tip of that and work away. Start at the tip, work all the way down. And looking straight down at it so I can see exactly where the work is being done. And do the same thing over here. And I'm standing square to my grinder. Okay, I'm not kind of over here, not getting here. It's like proper shooting position. You get your body working for you, and I realize I probably look like a humpback troll over here drinking out of a water fountain. But get square, use both hands, start at the end where you can see it, and bring it up to you. Then I'm going to do each side of the blade. Trying to grind on it very evenly and run at the same rate up that grinder. Okay, I'm going to stop right there. Now, all of those little grinder marks are an opportunity for your pritchel to stick. Okay, so you've got all those little grooves in there, and you're going to knock that into a piece of hot metal. It's going to get tight, and the metal around it is going to form into each of those grooves, and it's going to cause your pritchel to stick. Now, to a certain degree, your grease is going to cook in there and help that let go, but not by a lot. So I kind of use a glove for this. Maybe not the fingers sticking out everywhere. And you don't need a post vise for this, really. I mean, it's nice, but any old benchtop vise works. Just something that will clamp it poking pretty straight up at you. Okay. Now, for my back pritchel, I'm going to use the hard side. So these Justin Fry sandboxes, man, these things are God's gift to a blacksmith as far as I'm concerned. Especially God's gift to a farrier, because you can change out these belts. Belts are cheap compared to rasps, and they're a heck of a lot easier to store, and all these different grits. So I'm going to use a pretty fresh 200 grit, and I'm going to use the hard side, right? So one of this side has a piece of leather on it, right, to make it a little bit softer, and the other side runs right up against a machined flat piece of aluminum. Okay, and I'm going to use this, and I can either draw it or work across, but my goal is to kind of finish truing up my lines and get that a nice long taper smooth and polished up. And what you want to see when you're done dressing up, and we'll go over this in a little bit more detail, but if all your lines are straight, you're going to have a nice little picture at the end. So when you look straight down at the end of your pritchel, you should see your rectangle and then see straight lines coming out of all four corners. If there's a little bobble in that line, okay, that's a little dramatic, but there's a little bobble in that line, that means it's not straight. Your planes aren't straight, they're not flat. So go back and work it until you see nice straight lines. coming out of the corners. And that matters when you're tuning up a punch too, right? Headstand. And if you look at the back of a W brand ruler, that's what that little picture is for. Just kind of a little illustration of what that's supposed to look like. Kind of handy. Well, it's all about bringing all your lines clean to the center and being symmetrical. This picture and this picture should be the same. This picture and this picture should be the same. So, alright, let's grind up a regular pritchel now. Now this next one that we're going to grind up, so it's got a pretty good parallel tip on it, but I'm going to push a little bit more parallel tip into it with the grinder just to kind of show you how you can do it if you're not feeling confident about forging them up. But just remember that every time you grind on this thing, you leave all that pritchel on the ground, and I hate that. I mean, like I said, I'm cheap, and if I leave all that pritchel on the ground, I gotta buy another one. Which, again, so I'm sure Todd Walker likes that, but my checking account doesn't like it. So I'm gonna grind this one up, and I'm gonna set this one up to be a little bit more ready to go. Okay, so I'm going to stand square, use both hands, make contact, and pull away. Sometimes you're in a hurry, you got to use the grinder. So, I'm going to start at the bottom, staying away from my tip. I'm going to cut in and track up and away, slowly. Cut in, track up and away, slowly. Do the same thing to the other side. Cut in, track up and away. And I'm trying to get those parallels as even and symmetrical as possible. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm going to start behind my tip and go away. Now these sharp corners right here, okay, those want to cut in. So I'm going to turn this, start behind my tip, and knock that corner off. Start behind the tip, knock the corner off, and do that all the way around. Don't get carried away. You're just trying to get last. Now, these corners make a cutting edge. And when you drive that in, it's going to cut into the shoe, and it's not going to want to release and come out. So I'm going to knock just enough of that corner off to get away with the cutting edge. So I'm going to stay behind the tip, and again, I'm going to drive in and pull away. 180 around, pull away. That's enough for that one. So now, I don't need the glove for this one because it has these two nice parallel sides. Alright, now, there's some Humpy Dumpies in here. So I've got to work those out. So I'm going to use, so I keep a couple of these at the vise. Again, it's the old Justin Price sandbox. But I've got a pretty fresh 80 grit on here, and I'm going to go across those, and I'm going to finish this thing off by hand. Because like I said earlier, it's a lot easier to keep track of what you're doing and see. Okay, so I'm going to lay it on full contact with all that that's away from there and just kind of brush that up a bit. But I'm using this front edge on the leather side to work my way up that parallel bit all the way to the tip. And again, I'm going to do all four sides and just finish truing this thing up. because it's a lot easier for me to see this way. Okay, I'm going to work those corners just up to the tip because I don't want to knock the corners off in the cutting edge. So just up where it's going to pass through so it doesn't dig into the shoe. Okay, then I'm going to use the hard side. Adjust the tip a bit. And then I'm going to finish squaring and sizing that tip up with the flat side, or the hard side, like the leather behind it. Okay, and then I'm going to switch over and I'm going to run through the same process with my 100 grit because there's you can just feel that it's rough. And all that rough spot is just going to cause an opportunity for that thing to dig in. This is a big reason why I don't like grinding them up. Because if you forge them up, they come off the hammer smooth. You don't have to polish them. And you get a little practice forging smooth lines. It's going to take a bit more than that, but you get the idea. And again, I can take the hard side and finish truing it up. That should be a nice 4 right there. Hey, get off there. Get off. I'm going to grab myself an E4. Camera lid is on top of my nail bin. Okay, and then I'm going to check to see if it's the right size. I want to just see my pritchel on either side of the nail. I want it just ever so slightly larger than the nail. And the reason I do that is when you come back and you flatten all that out, you close the nail hole down a bit. And so you end up going back and forth a ton to where if you just kind of preemptive a little bit larger, then when you flatten it out and it closes down, then it's when you clean that nail hole up, it's ready to roll. So I like that pretty good for a 4. And then I should have a pink pen. There it is. And I'm going to tell this pritchel, you are a 4. And I'm going to tell him on both sides so we can see coming and going that he is a 4. Alright, very good. And if you got to do them on the grinder, that's the way I do them. And now I've got my carry pritchel. Now my carry pritchels, I like to roll off a little bit quicker because I want it to kind of lock into that nail hole as soon as possible. And I'm really going to probably use a nail hole that I wouldn't normally run one in anyway, but just kind of right at the very beginning of the nail hole, you want it to kind of lock in. You don't want it to go to the bottom of the nail hole and mushroom and become a rivet, because then you can't get it off or you completely wreck your nail hole. So I like for these to be pretty parallel and a pretty abrupt taper so that it grabs it as soon as possible. Really should wait for the grinder to wind up. For this I go the opposite direction. I tuck and pull off the tip, because that always rounds that tip off. Now, my cherry pritchels, I always grind those up because I want the little coarse, rough spots to kind of cut in and grab the shoe. Because that's the point, right? So, I'm going to set the rest of these up, get them ready to go, and we're going to do some... Okay, so I'm going to grind the rest of these up and get them ready to go to forge up the ones that need to be forged up. Now, remember, if you got a whole bunch of these, you can just make a pile and spend a random afternoon or shop day like I do, tuning your tools up. And so, the next thing we're going to do, I'm going to get these ground up, and then we'll make a video for how I forge them up. And we're going to do it in the gas just because so many people said you shouldn't. You know, it's just kind of the way I roll. Anyway, that's it. Peace. I'm out.